Dark romance is one of the most, if not the most, controversial book genres, so I want to talk for a little bit about my thoughts on it. Now, I want to clarify, this is not going to be a hate video on dark romance. I'm just explaining some of my thoughts about it. I will also say I am not a dark romance reader. I have not read any dark romance books. Because of that, you may say I'm not qualified to talk about this, and that opinion is valid. However, I have read a lot of reviews on dark romance books. I have watched a lot of videos about them, and so I have formed some opinions. Now, yes, to be more qualified to talk about it, I should probably have read dark romance books. However, personally, that's not something I feel comfortable reading. So I'm going to be talking about this from a perspective of a person who has not read any dark romance. Now, before I get into this video, I'm going to say one thing. I know people are going to most likely argue with me in the comments. If you watch this video and you disagree with me, that's okay. Like, you can have a different opinion than me. However, watch the entire video, please, before you start arguing with me, because I don't want to have to repeat my arguments, if that makes sense. You can tell me your own arguments, but if I've already addressed them, I don't want to have to address them again. So please watch the entire video, be respectful. You're allowed to have a different opinion. However, this is what I think, and please listen to my entire argument before you tell me your own, okay? Let's get on with the video. Okay, so what is my main problem with dark romance? Well, I know this does not apply to every dark romance book, so please do not come at me for that. It just applies to some. So from the reviews I've read, from the videos I've watched, dark romance often romanticizes a lot of terrible things. Now, in books, we can excuse a lot of things. We can excuse the main characters murdering people, stealing, committing all sorts of crimes. There's one thing, though, that the book community pretty strongly agrees on that is not okay for a love interest in a book to do, and those two things are cheating or raping. Those two are not allowed in the book community. We don't condone those. However, recently it's been feeling like people are perceiving them as more okay, and not everyone. There are a lot of people who are still very against it. However, certain people allow them in books now that they read, if that makes sense. So for instance, I'm going to use the example that a lot of people use, which is the book Haunting Adeline. Now, of course, I've never read this, but I have seen and read many reviews on this book because it is very popular in the book community right now. If you're on the book community at all, you have probably heard about Haunting Adeline. And there are a lot of people who love this book. There are a lot of people who hate this book. And I haven't really seen anybody in the middle. I'm definitely on the side that hates this book, because one thing that this book does a lot is romanticizes rape. Apparently, the main character, he's someone who, like, hunts and kills rapists, so okay, good for him. But according to the reviews, he also rapes the main character. And the people who like this book don't seem to have a problem with that. And so here's my second problem with it. We have the people who read and enjoy the book, but can recognize that this isn't okay. And then we have the people that read and enjoy the book and don't find anything wrong with it. And so I think that's my main problem with the genre, is because we've gotten so used to seeing these topics represented in books that people aren't finding a problem with them anymore. And I think that's very problematic, because we shouldn't be okay with having a rapist as a main character and then romanticizing it. You can have that as a main character if you're trying to prove something about society and the world to people. Obviously, that's going to be a book that a lot of people aren't comfortable reading, but you have the right to write it. But when it's not presented as a bad thing, and instead it's presented as a romantic thing, and people are romanticizing it, and they think that this is what a relationship should be like, it becomes a big problem. And so that's my second problem with dark romance. People romanticize these very problematic relationships, and they think that it's okay. And they think that's what a relationship is like. And if they got into a relationship like that, I would be very concerned about the decisions they might make if that makes sense, because if they're constantly reading about these toxic, abusive partners in books, what's to say they aren't going to think that's okay in real life in a partner that they have? Does that make sense? Now, my third problem, and this may be my final point, I'm not sure yet, is the fact that we have so many young kids, especially young girls, reading these books. Now, to be honest, I think dark romance is a genre that nobody under 15 or 16 should be reading. However, I know we can't stop these kids. We have 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, even girls younger than that reading Haunting Adeline and other dark romance books. And these girls are still at a very young age and are very impressionable, so reading about these things and hearing people rave about these books online, that's going to negatively impact their development and what they think is okay in a relationship. And I've already touched on that about how they create unrealistic relationships for people and toxic ideas, so I'm not going to go back to that. I believe it does the same thing, but worse, to these young girls that are reading the books. And you also might say, okay, well, that's the girl's choice to read them, and yes, you're right about it, but it's not just their fault that they're reading these books. I believe it's also a problem within the book community because they are constantly recommending these books and not talking enough about how they are not appropriate for young children to be reading. Because I'm constantly seeing videos about different book recommendations, and some of them are great, and I know they're appropriate for young teenagers to be reading. And then occasionally in there, they'll just be thrown in some dark romance books with zero warning that these books are not for the same maturity level as the other books that they're recommending. So you can recommend these books to people, that's okay, but you need to be very aware of your audience and who is watching you, and are you letting them know that this is not appropriate content for them to be reading? Now, I think this is actually the last thing I want to address, and this is a very controversial topic, probably the most controversial thing I'm going to say in this video. So, dark romance books, they're filled with smut, spice, sex, usually. Not all dark romance books, some of them are fine, I'm sure of that. However, a lot of the ones that are really popular get really popular because of the intense romance in them. And I'm not one to tell you what to do. If you're a grown adult, that's not my place to tell you what to do, no matter what I think about it. But I think something that we should agree on more is the fact that young girls shouldn't be reading this explicit content. Now, here's a controversial thing I'm going to say. Smut, spice, sex scenes in books, those are porn. And our society does not want to acknowledge that, but it's the truth. They are. People traditionally think of porn as like watching it or looking at pictures, I guess, but how exactly is that different from reading it? Because you're still experiencing the same emotions. You're still visualizing it. Even if you're not physically seeing it, you're still visualizing it. And the fact is, all of these different things, you're still watching, reading about people having sex. That's porn. That is what is considered porn. And so why do we think it's not okay for young girls to watch it, but it's okay to recommend them books with it? I don't understand. And I've also heard people say, okay, well, they're learning about it in school. How is that any different from them reading it? And okay, yes, they may be learning about it in school. That's good for them. I mean, they have to learn how this stuff works. So if they're teaching that in school, I'm homeschooled, I don't go to a public school, so I don't know how that works in public school, I will say. But the fact is, learning about it in school and the anatomy or whatever of how it works is not the same as constantly reading it in a book and getting addicted to this smut, getting addicted to this porn. That's what it is. They are very different things, and you can't say that, well, because they're learning about it in school, it's okay for them to be reading it in these dark romance books, because it is not. And I'm not saying that dark romance is the only genre that has a problem with this. I think all genres definitely have a problem with this on some level, especially fantasy. I'm a fantasy reader. I have to watch very carefully what books I pick up because I don't know what's going to be in them, and I don't want to be reading explicit content. Like, that's a choice I've made for myself because of my beliefs and what I feel comfortable with and how I was raised. And you might say that those things are what is dictating this entire video. However, I do believe that even if I didn't have the beliefs that I do, I'm a Christian, even if I didn't have those beliefs, I still wouldn't think it's okay for young girls to be reading these dark romance books. So please don't say that, well, just because I'm a Christian is what makes me have these beliefs, because I really do think that, those beliefs aside, I would still think the same thing. And so all genres do have a problem with this, but it's mainly dark romance because they often focus on the very intense romance side of things in these books. Okay, I'm sorry I keep saying one more thing, but I remembered one more thing I wanted to talk about. So these days, I feel like it's a big thing in our society to think that children are growing up so fast. And tweens, teenagers, they don't look like they used to. They all look older. They want to look older. They want to act older. They think and know about things that they shouldn't until they're older. And they're growing up at a much faster rate than we did as kids. And I feel like, of course, this has to do with the social media side of things, but aside from social media, I feel like what we don't talk about is one of the reasons they're growing up so fast is because they're not given content that's appropriate for their age. And now this is something I could talk about in a whole nother video, so I'm just going to touch on it a little bit today. But back when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, there were so many book series and TV shows that were marketed for my age. Think Hunger Games, Percy Jackson, Harry Potter, Keep of the Lost Cities, Divergent, Maze Runner, Land of Stories. All of these books that were recommended specifically for that young teenager phase, for like 11 to 14-year-olds. There's not a lot of new book series now that are popular for that age category. Have you noticed that? There's not a lot. And I guarantee you they're being written, but they're not getting popular. What's getting popular is these books for older teenagers. And because that's what's popular, that's what the younger generations are reading. That's what these 11, 12, 13-year-olds are reading, because there's nothing that's popular for their age anymore. The same thing as with the books. There's no popular shows for that age anymore. Do you see what I mean? Like, I feel like the popular shows right now, or at least in the past few years, have been like Stranger Things, Outer Banks, Wednesday, Summer I Turned Pretty, My Life with the Walter Boys. And while all of those are good shows, they're not meant for like 10 to 13-year-olds. They're not for that age group. They're meant for teenagers, and I would even say like 14 up. But because that's what's popular and because there's nothing for their age, that's what all of these younger tweens are watching. So because they're not being given content that's appropriate for their age, these young tweens, young teenagers are reading and watching stuff that's not appropriate for them, and they're growing up quicker because of that. Does that make sense? Anyway, I think I'm gonna end the video here. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if there's anything I left out or if you disagree. Anyway, thank you for watching. I had a lot of fun doing this, and I will probably make more video essays like this soon because I have a lot of things that I want to talk about, and this was really fun. So anyway, thank you for watching. Bye, y'all.